Perek Aleph, Mishna Beis. If you remember last Mishnah, we discussed the definition of an Av Hatumos. And we said that an Av Hatumos is able to make Adam and Keilim Tameh. Adam and Keilim Tameh. They're able to be Metame, to transmit Tumah to people and to vessels. So this is the ABCs of Tumah and Tahara. This is the basics, that an Av Hatumos is able to transmit Tumah to humans and to vessels. Now once the humans and vessels become Tameh, they're not able to transmit Tumah to other Adam and Keilim, and to other humans and to other vessels. They're not able to do that. Because through the transmission, their Tumah has been weakened and watered down, and therefore the human and the vessel is not able to transmit Tumah to other humans and other vessels. The human and the vessel that became Tameh are only able to make foods and drinks Tameh. Ochlim and Mashkim. They're only able to transmit their Tumah to foods and drinks at that point. These are the most basic rules of Tumah and Tahara. Now, as we said in last Mishnah, we spoke about the 5 Avos Hatumos, the 5 items that can transmit their Tumah to humans and to vessels through Maga, through touch. And we said in this Mishnah, we are going to discuss an additional 2 Avos Hatumos that can transmit their Tumah not only through Maga, but even through what's called Masa, through being carried. So let's start the Mishnah. L'mala mehem, above them, above the Avos Hatumos of last Mishnah, is number 1, a nevela, which is an animal carcass which has not been shechted, and number 2, umechatas and para aduma water. Mechatas is para aduma water. Sheyesh bohem, but there's enough water kidei hazaya in order to sprinkle. You have the vessel with para aduma water in it, and if there's enough water in the vessel to sprinkle with, that's what we're talking about in this Mishnah. And these 2 Avos Hatumos are able to make a person Tameh not only if the person touches them, but even if the person carries them without touching them, it will also transmit Tumah to them. As the Mishnah says, Sheheim mitamin es ha'odam, they can transmit Tumah to a human b'masa, through being carried. Now with regards to mechatas, with regards to para aduma water, there is an exception to the rule. Because if the kohen is sprinkling the water, or if the kohen is handling the water, touching the water, with the purpose of sprinkling people that are tameh, he does not become tameh. Tumah does not transmit tumah to him. This is a common misconception. I don't know why people think that the kohen becomes tameh. It's only the people that are handling the paraduma water without the purpose of sprinkling, those are the people that become tameh. If you're like, oh, I want to touch the paraduma water, or I want to carry the paraduma water for no purpose, then you'll become tameh if you touch it or carry it. So now, as we said, these 2 Avos Hatumos can transmit their tumah if you carry them. Now, what does it mean, Masa? What are the different forms of Masa? So if you look here on the side, we have a picture of a person, and I want to demonstrate how this person can become Tameh through Tumas Masa, through carrying Tumah. So number 1, imagine he's carrying a bag, and the bag has a nevela in it, or para aduma water in it. This X is the para aduma water, or it's the nevela, and since he's picked up the bag, he's now carrying the nevela, or he's carrying the para aduma water, and even though he's not touching it, he now becomes Tameh. Now number 2, even if he doesn't physically pick up the bag, but someone placed the nevela or the para aduma water on his shoulder, so now he's not touching it because he's wearing clothes, so it's not touching his skin, and he hasn't picked it up, but he's carrying it, so long as he's moved the weight of the item on his shoulder, he becomes Tameh. And then another form of Tumas Masa is if you have a board over here, here's a board, and on the board, on the other side of the board, you have the nevela or the para aduma water. And when he moves the board, and therefore moves the weight of the nevela or the para aduma water, even though it's never got picked up off of the board, it's never been picked up, it's never been carried, so to speak, but since he's moved the weight of the nevela or of the para aduma water, so he becomes Tameh. That form of Tumas Masa is called Hesed. It's called Hesed, where he hasn't physically picked up the item, but he's moved the weight. These 3 forms of Masa will make him Tameh. Now the Torah says something interesting. The Torah says that when a person becomes Tameh through Tumas Masa, imagine this person here is becoming Tumah through the carrying the bag method. The Torah says his clothes become Tameh. Not only does he become Tameh, but his clothes become Tameh. Now clothes are considered Keilim, they're considered vessels. Now why is that an interesting thing? That his clothes become Tameh? Because if you remember, clothes are considered Keilim, and how can a Kli become Tameh? Let's go back. How can a Keilim become Tameh? Only through an Av Hatumos. a kli can only become tamei directly from an avatuma. So over here, so how can his clothes become tamei? His clothes aren't touching the nevela. And as we said, clothes, Keilim, can only become tamei from direct contact with an avatuma. And the answer is that there's a concept called tuma b'chiburim, called tuma b'chiburim. This concept literally means tuma through connections. And the idea is that while the person carries the tuma, while he's doing the act of Masa, any vessels that he simultaneously touches also become tamei. So since he's touching his clothes become tamei. Because as you do the act of Masa, Tuma B'chiburim tells you that any vessel he simultaneously touches also becomes tamei. Now perhaps the mechanics of this is because as he's doing the act of Masa, he turns into an Av HaTuma, and therefore he could be metamei the vessels. But whatever the mechanics is, the Torah tells you that as you perform Tumas Masa, any other vessel you're simultaneously touching, namely your clothes, will also become tamei. That concept is called a tuma b'chiburim. So let's read the next part of the Mishnah inside. So as we said, these two Avos Hatumos are able to be metamin es adam, can transmit tuma to people b'masa, through being carried. L'tamei bigodim, and then your clothes will become tamei bimaga, if you touch your clothes. This concept, as we said, is called tuma b'chiburim, that as you're carrying the tuma, your clothes become tamei also. And the Mishnah ends off by saying, "V'chasuche begadim," but your clothes are held back from tuma. Chasuche means to be held back. Your clothes are held back from tuma bimaga. If you only merely touch the tuma, if you touch the tuma without carrying it, then the clothes you touch are tahar. So to demonstrate how that works is we have this second person over here, and if he touches the tuma without carrying it, so perhaps it's on some type of chair. So he's not carrying it and he's only touching it. So then his clothes remain tahar. Because since he's merely touching the tuma b'chiburim is not activated, and his clothes remain tahar. And it's only when he's carrying the tuma does tuma b'chiburim become activated, and therefore his clothes or any vessel that he simultaneously touches also become tamei. Now there's one more additional fact with regards to tumas masa, the transmission of carrying tuma, that's extremely important. And that is, let's go to our third person over here. Tumas Masa only transmits Tuma to people. But vessels cannot become Tamei through Tumas Masa, through carrying Tuma. And therefore, if you have Tuma on top of a stack of plates, so as we said, only the top plate which is actually touching the Tuma becomes Tamei. Only the top plate becomes Tamei. But all other plates that are only bearing the Tuma's weight, is only doing Tumas Masa, all the other bottom plates remain tahar. Because as we said, Tumas Masa doesn't apply to vessels. Now if you have a person carrying the pile of plates, he in effect is carrying the Tuma, he's doing Tumas Masa, and people can become Tamei through Tumas Masa, and therefore he will become Tamei. He will become Tamei because he's carrying Tuma. And as he carries the Tuma, as we said, Tuma b'chiburim is activated, and all other vessels that he simultaneously touches becomes tamei through Tuma b'chiburim, and therefore his clothes become tamei. Not only that, but the bottom vessel that he touches, the bottom plate that he's touching, also becomes tamei with Tuma b'chiburim. So what would happen is that the top plate becomes tamei because it's touching the nevela. The bottom plate will become tamei because it's touching the person through Tuma b'chiburim, and the middle plates will remain tahar. So now it's your turn to read the Mishnah.